seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. But if I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Bernard Sobie of Rockford, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay. Now, can you start us with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born right here in Grand Rapids, August 7th, 1927.
Okay.
First generation of German immigrants. My mother and dad came from Berlin
Okay.
in the early 20s. My dad fought in the First World War in the German Army.
The German Army.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Sobie, I mean, sometimes that's shortened from a Polish name, like Sobieski or something like that.
Yeah, it may have been that, I don't know. But we're definitely Germans.
Okay. So you're German. And then what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
My dad was a tool and die maker here in Grand Rapids forget the name of the company. But that was his. My mother, before I came around, she worked in the local broom factory.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're the oldest kid in the family?
The only one.
Only one, okay. And now, did your father have steady work through the 30s, or was it on and off?
No, he was on and off during the 30s. And the interesting thing there was my mother's stepfather was the editor of a big Berlin newspaper, and he told my dad, if you want to come back here, I'll give you a job.
Mm-hmm. So
we went back in the early 30s for a couple of years.
Wow.
And at that time, Hitler was becoming prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and dad said, we better get out of here and get back to home. But Hitler didn't want them to go because they were German nationals.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a native-born American. He didn't dare keep me back, so we got out of there in time.
Okay. And do you remember anything about life in Germany, or were you too young?
No, I remember, believe it or not. There's little excerpts here and there. One of the things I remember was at that time, all the little kids my age, 4, 5, 6 years old, wanted to be one of those little brown shirters,
Mm-hmm.
which I wanted to be too because they had a nice little uniform.
Right.
But my mother said, no, nothing doing. So I never did get that. But I remember visiting the Kaiser's Palace,
Mm-hmm.
one thing. I remember I had my adenoids removed with no anesthetic. Can you believe that?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I remember things like that.
Okay. Now, did you go back and forth by boat?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
remember anything about those trips?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay, because you were still pretty young at that point.
Yeah.
Because Hitler takes power like 1933. So.
I had my 6th birthday here, just after we got back.
Okay. So that's right around. So I guess that's the point when the Nazis are taking power, because Hitler goes in 33.
Right.
But they're pretty important for about a year or so before that, and then starting to dominate.
Right.
Political
Yes, that's
scene.
true.
Yeah. Okay. So you had an interesting side trip there. Now, as you're getting older, then, because of your family's German connections, in the late 30s, and then when the war starts in Europe, are you paying attention to that, or is your family paying attention to it?
Yes, because they had relatives back there. My mother had a couple of brothers, and her sister came with her, though, so
Mm-hmm.
she was here. And when the war got into the thick of things, and we were sending, my mother and dad were sending care packages back.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't have anything to eat. It was pretty tough. I remember stuff like that.
Okay. So war starts in 39, but it's
Right.
not until 1941 that the Americans get into it. Now, then when Pearl Harbor happens, you're still pretty young.
Right.
So did you figure the war would be over before it got to you, or?
I never gave it a thought. It was so far away,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't mean a whole lot at that time. My mother was quite worried. She was hoping to be over before I got to be of age.
Right. Okay.
And it almost worked that way.
Okay. So you're in high school, and when do you graduate from high school?
June of 1945.
Okay. And then at what point did you actually enter the military?
Well, right out of high school, I think I mentioned this earlier, none of us wanted to go in the Army, so we all volunteered for the Navy. Probably a dozen of us anyway from my senior class. And that was we did that before we actually graduated, so that they had their claws into us.
Right.
And we were called up, I think, as I recall, we were called up last part of July or the first part of August, right in there.
But right before the war actually ends.
Just before it ended.
Okay. And where did they send you for training?
Okay, we went from here out to Great Lakes to boot camp for boot camp. It was supposed to be 10 weeks, 10-week boot camp. Actually, it was supposed to be 8, and then they changed it to 10 because the war was over, and they wanted us to get a little more training.
Okay.
So
Now, what did the training actually consist of in boot camp?
oh gosh, we learned to fight fires in the water, and we learned to obey orders. We went through gas mask training, things of that nature.
Now, what happens in gas mask training?
Well, they fill this building up with tear gas, and you put your mask on and go in there, and then they tell you to take it off. That was not much fun.
And what was the point of that?
Just to get you familiar with it, in
Okay.
case there was always that threat of gas attack. Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot about that either.
Okay. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to life in the military?
I really didn't have much problem. It was regimented, you did what you were told, and you went to bed when you were told, and get up when you were told. I didn't really have a problem with it.
Okay. Now, were there other guys you were training with who had a harder time adjusting?
I don't recall anything like that. Everything seemed to go along pretty well. We all got along pretty well.
What kind of people did you have training you?
Well, there was a shortage. The company we were in, as all of them were, supposed to be run by a chief, and there were no chiefs available. So they went all the way down to second class petty officer. But boy, that guy was good. He was very rigid, very fair, tough for a second class petty officer. He was very educated, very well.
And had he served actually, at sea or in the war properly, or was he older?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. We didn't get much of a history on
So
him.
he didn't share any of that with you?
Not that I recall.
All
And I
right.
would recall it, I think. So I don't think he did.
Okay. Now, when you're in training or when you enlisted, did you express any kind of preference for what sort of job you would do, or were you just going in and you'd go where they send you?
Exactly. There was no options.
Okay.
There were no options.
So you finish your 10 weeks at Great Lakes.
Yes.
And then what happens to you?
Well, then we shipped to a unit called OGU, it was outgoing units, and they decided where we were going to go. And we didn't all stick together then, because some went this way and some went that way. And I went down to New Orleans and got on a troop transport down there. We were supposed to go to Panama. And my dad got quite ill, and he sent me home.
Okay.
Be with him, wasn't good. And so when I got home, I was only home with him for about a week, and he seemed to get better, and things were okay. And then I was shipped down to the Norfolk, Virginia Naval Air Station.
Okay. And how would they get you to New Orleans or to Norfolk?
Well, they send you orders and ticket, information on that, and you get on a train and go.
Okay. Now, had you taken long train trips before that you could remember, or?
Not that I can recall.
Yeah. You might have before you went overseas when you were really young, but
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you remember how long the train trips took? Or
Nope.
Not much about that.
Kind of foggy.
Okay. All right. You get down to Norfolk, and then what do they do with you?
I was signed to a unit that handled the mail for the base, just for our unit. And just normal, typical, everyday paperwork.
Okay. And did your unit have a name or a number that you can remember? Or?
Not that I remember anything.
It's just part of the base facility?
It was part of the base facility. Yeah, the airplanes were right outside the window.
Okay. So you're at the Naval Air Station there then?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, did they give you any sort of training or orientation when you got there, or did they just send you someplace?
No, you just went into the unit where you were, going to be stationed with, and you learned from the people around you.
Okay. And how long did it take to catch on to what you had to do?
Wasn't too long, I guess.
All right. Now, did you have sort of a daily routine there?
Yes, I used to go and get up and go to my desk, and shuffle the paperwork and go to the post office and get the mail for the guys. That was kind of what it was.
Yeah. How much actual work would you have to do in a day? About how many hours were actually spent working rather than sitting around?
Boy, I don't know. I don't recall. It's so darn far back. I don't recall. Seemed like I was busy all day.
Okay, so there was stuff to do.
Oh yeah, there was stuff to do.
Now, when you went in originally, you know, you're in training and the war actually ends. Now, did they say anything to you about whether you could expect to get out early or if you'd served a full 2 years or 3 years or something?
Well, we went in not knowing how long we were going to stay. It wasn't a
Right.
definite enlistment period.
Right.
So we were always talking about, well, we might get out early. There's a lot of scuttlebutt going around, you know. But then we heard we would only be in a year, and then we heard it was a year and a half, and then we heard, you know, all kinds of rumors.
Okay.
But they started assigning points for what you did and how long you did it. And then they'd say, well, you know, when you got 10 points, you're going to get released. And that's kind of what. And then pretty soon it was 8 points, you know, and kept doing that sort of thing.
And of course, during the war itself, when you were assigning, I mean, party points were harder to come by.
Oh,
and
yeah.
people in combat zones and things, and the numbers then were much higher than that.
Yes.
So they were. It was their way of trimming back down. But in the meantime, there, you know, you have. So you're living on the base. I mean, do you get to go into town with any regularity?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And what kind of atmosphere was there? How did the people in that community treat the servicemen?
Well, they didn't care much for us. There was too many of them around. But basically, they were, you know, they were nice. You know, we'd go out to eat occasionally, not very often. Go down to local pubs.
Okay. Because, I mean, sometimes people talk about things like, you know, they charge sailors more for a cup of coffee than they do for other people.
I didn't run into any of that.
Nothing like that. Okay. And then what kind of people were serving along with you? Or do you know anything about any of their backgrounds? Or
No, not looking back at it, I don't. We're just, you know, regular guys like myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, when you're down there and you're in Virginia, did you notice sort of the racial segregation in the society?
Yes, I did. I took a side trip over to Williamsburg, and we were all standing to get on the bus, and there was a black man in front of us, and he, you know, he was standing in line just like we were, and they would not let him on until all the rest of us got on.
Mm-hmm.
And that irritated me. It really did. And I didn't think that was fair at all.
All right.
But that's the only thing I can remember ever happening like
Okay.
that.
Now, were there any black servicemen on the base? Or
Oh yeah, we had a couple of them in boot camp with us. Nicest guys I ever met.
Mhm.
Really nice people. I remember one thing, I left my wallet laying on my bunk, and he picked it up and said, "Hey, you left your wallet here." I was impressed by that.
Okay. Now, I guess the official desegregation of the military doesn't start till about 47, but you're in boot camp in 45, and at least in Chicago, you have some black sailors training along with you at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think our company was only, I think there was only 3 or 4 of them. There were
Yeah.
very few.
But that was probably also something, you know, new, but it's always interesting to kind of find out where things like that start, because I've had other people tell me about some racial mixing and training units in 1945, which you don't normally hear about. But,
Yeah.
you know, it's something that obviously, I mean, you know when you were there, and then that's something you're going to remember.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, did you go up, like when you're in Norfolk, I mean, did you go as far as Washington, D.C. or places like that, or did you just stay right there?
Stayed pretty much, we weren't allowed to go too far.
Okay.
I remember that. I don't remember what the distance was, but we weren't allowed to go too far.
Okay. Now, how long did you actually stay in Norfolk then?
Yeah, how long was I there? I don't remember. Until discharge time.
Okay, so you were in just about a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know 9 months or something
I
like
must
that.
have been there, yeah, something like that, 8,
Okay.
9 months.
Are there any particular events or things that happened there? If you think back to being there, what do you think of?
The only thing I do remember is getting in. I had a little Cushman scooter to run over to the mailboxes. Got on that thing, going tearing around one of the hangars, and here's this Hellcat. Big, huge propeller. It stood like that because it was not tricycle gear, and the propeller was so big that even if it had gotten down, it'd be striking the ground. And the pilots, they can't see where they're going. You know, they're looking around that huge engine in front of them. I come around that corner, and there we are. I'm heading for that propeller. The only thing I could do was think to dump it. I did. And the pilot was up there, he was waving his fist at me. But it turned out all right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's your one scare for
Yeah.
the Navy
Boy,
service.
that was spooky.
Okay. And then basically, so after about a year in, then you get your 8 points or whatever it is. And
Yeah,
get
whatever it
discharged.
was at that
Yeah.
time.
Okay. When you got back out, then what did you do next?
Drew unemployment till fall when school started, and then went to JC.
Okay.
on
And
the
JC
GI Bill.
being, for an outside audience,
Junior college, Grand Rapids
so
Junior
Grand
College.
Rapids Junior College.
Yeah,
Okay.
now known as Community College, Grand
Right.
Rapids Community College.
Okay. And did you have a job while you were going to school, or were you just a student?
No.
Okay. Now, were you getting any kind of veterans benefits, or had you not been in there long enough to get tuition?
I got GI Bill,
Okay.
yeah, and you got $90 a month to live on,
Mhm.
and your books were paid for, and your tuition was paid for.
And were you still living at home at that point?
I was
Okay. All right. So you do 2 years there, and what do you do after that?
transferred to Michigan State in East Lansing, and I took up an engineering course. And because of the transfer, some of the credits didn't go. I took stuff at junior college that I didn't need, and stuff
Mhm.
I did need I didn't take.
Right.
They didn't tell me. So I had to spend an extra year there. So I actually spent 3 years at Michigan State.
Okay. Now, were male students at Michigan State expected to do an ROTC program?
No,
Okay.
I beg your pardon. If you're a vet, I was considered a veteran and didn't have to do
Okay.
that, but the non-vets did. Yes.
But did you participate in that program yourself?
That's an interesting story, I thought. I can never forget this. I was in my last year at Michigan State as an engineering student and a veteran, and I got orders from the Navy to go back to active duty for this Korean thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, Lordy, this took place probably early September. And I didn't want to go back without finishing my school. I thought to myself, if I do go back, I'll never come back to finish the schooling. So I'm really walking around the campus, you know, like jaw dragging, and one of my friends, he was a football player, he says, Bernie, what's the matter with you? So I told him my problem. He says, why don't you go to the ROTC building, see if they can help you? I said, well, what can they do? He said, I don't know, but go try it. I said, okay. I went over. The first gentleman I bumped into over at the ROTC building was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. Well, he says, yeah, I might be able to help you. He says, no, you're an engineering student, you're going to graduate. You're in your senior year. I said, yes. He said, you're a veteran. Yes. We have a special program. So the Navy had to release me because I was going into an officer's training program. And I got into the Air Force and graduated, got my degree, and got a commission out of it. So I was way ahead.
All right. And so when did you graduate and get the commission?
I was in 1951 I graduated
Right, okay,
in May.
All right. And then once you do that, now, did they send you a place for more training?
I got my orders, my degree in one hand and the orders to report to active duty in the other hand.
All right.
But as I say, I was much better than going in as a yeoman third class.
Right.
And I went to San Antonio we're starting out to find out where you're going to go, San Antonio, Texas. And we spent some time down there, and then we transferred to Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. And I spent a year there in training for communications.
Okay. Now, where in Illinois was Scott Air Force Base?
It's in East St. Louis,
Mhm.
just across the river from St. Louis.
All right. And what was that? What was it? I mean, were you living on the base at that point?
No, the
Okay.
officers could live wherever they wanted to. Just be there in the morning, all
All right.
day.
And where did you live?
Well, we lived just on the borderline of East St. Louis
Mhm.
and St. Louis. There were some apartments there, civilian apartments.
Okay. Well, East St. Louis is in Illinois, and St. Louis is in Missouri.
That's correct.
So, were you in the Illinois side, or?
I was on the Illinois side.
Okay. And East St. Louis was also a place that had kind of an interesting reputation. It was where a lot of the African Americans lived. There was
Yeah.
for a certain point of time, there was a great music scene there for jazz music and clubs and things like that. And there was also a lot of other stuff going on there.
Yeah, I don't remember any of that.
Okay, so that was not, whatever wild things might be happening were not part of
No.
your experience.
I was married at the time.
Ah,
Got married 1946.
Okay. All right, so you were behaving yourself.
Yep.
Okay. And what did the training consist of that you were taking there?
Well, we learned all about communications through telephones, radio. We actually built some small radios. We learned how to operate a communications center because there was always the enlisted men doing the actual work.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting, to say the least. I don't recall any highlights, anything that was exceptional that jumped out at me.
But how long was the program?
It took a year.
Okay. And how much of it was classroom and how much was actually doing back work or?
There was no physical labor involved,
Right.
no, but it was all classroom and some shops
Yeah.
on the side. We had to learn code. There was two of us couldn't learn code. Me, myself, and one other fellow. We had we had to learn at least 30 words a minute with Morse code. We finally made it, but we had to stay after class, and it's just something you either learn or you don't.
Yeah. Now, would they actually use Morse code in reality when you got into the Navy?
No,
Yeah.
no, Air Force.
Air Force, rather, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just a holdover from the way they used to do things.
Yeah, just in case, to give you a good background. It's like learning history.
Okay. And were they paying you enough that you and your wife could live reasonably well, or did she have to take a job? Or
At that time, she didn't have a job. No. After I left the base, then went over to Korea, then she went back to Grand Rapids, then she took a job.
Okay, so you're basically you get to you're in Illinois, you get a 51 into 52, and then sometime in the middle of 52, they send you to Korea.
Yep. I don't remember what the date was. I really
Okay.
don't.
Now you're the Air Force. When you went to Korea, did you at least get to fly?
Over and back.
Yep.
And I was sitting in the officers club one day over there and having a drink with a Marine. Turned out he was a helicopter pilot. He said, "You want to go for a ride?" I said, "Sure." Never been in a helicopter. So we took off and went over to his officers club, had a drink, came back. It was kind of fun.
Okay. All right. But anyway, so you go. When you flew out to Korea, was that on an Air Force transport or?
On the way over, we flew with Trans-American Airlines,
Okay.
which isn't around anymore.
Yep.
And on the way back, we flew on the Flying Tigers. So it was commercial.
Okay. Now, were these commercial planes that were chartered for the military, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, do you remember where you stopped on the way to Korea?
We stopped in Hawaii, and where the heck was the other one? One other place. I can't remember what it was right now. But Hawaii, we did stay. We
Okay.
stayed overnight there.
Did you stop in Japan, or?
Oh yeah, that was our first ultimate goal. We landed in Tokyo.
Okay. And did you stay in Japan for a little while, or immediately switch over to Korea?
No. We were. I don't remember how long we were there, but we stayed in Busan for a while. We didn't stay in Tokyo.
Okay.
And then they shipped us from there to Seoul,
Right.
and that was where I was stationed for quite a while.
Okay. And what was your assignment when you were in Seoul?
It was called duty officer. It took the officer to run the communications center for a work period, usually a long day. And then I was in for 3 months. I was shipped from there on side duty, so to speak. There's a term for it, and I can't remember that either.
That's
right
a
now.
TDY, maybe?
Extended. Yeah, TDY. That was a TDY, temporary duty assignment, to Wonsan Ni, which was the base peace camp for the talks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the only Air Force officer in that place.
All right. Let's talk a little bit first about that stint that you had in Seoul. Now, you're communications officer, and is this for an Air Force headquarters, or?
Yeah, I guess you would say that, yeah. Yeah. With whatever Air Force was involved at the time, we received orders, we don't even know where they came from, which would be directed to all the bases that had fighters or bombers or whatever, and say, well, tomorrow morning you guys are going to take off at 0600 and you're going here. And that was we called frags, fragmentation orders, because we split them up.
Okay. So you're probably getting stuff either from, it could be from Tokyo, it could be from Washington or wherever.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And how large a group of men were you working with?
Well, there was quite a few. I had a roommate, that. He was an MD in internal medicine, and there were a couple of my friends were dentists, and they were doing different sort of things. There were some of them just strictly in administration. It's really taxing my memory.
Okay. And then did you have sort of then a lot of enlisted men working for you, or just a few, or?
There weren't too many of those around. Excuse me. They were there, because I remember I had to go get a couple of them out of jail one time.
Now, were you on an actual base, or just in offices in the city, or?
No, we were in Seoul, and as I remember, it was on the east end of town, and we were told it had been a girls' university.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, not
Like
barracks.
dormitories?
Dormitories, that's what I want to say. Yeah, that was, and we ate there, we had dining rooms and so forth, yeah. But that was strictly officers.
Right. Okay. Now, did you have a lot of Koreans around? Did they work
Yes,
for you? Or?
yes, they did the menial jobs. We had a maid.
Mm-hmm.
We just called her a Josan. She'd clean her room, polish her shoes, and things of that nature. Make the beds every day. We had to pay them.
Yeah. And did you have any sort of Korean officers who worked with you as liaisons or things like that? Or?
No, I did not. When I was up at Wonsan Ni, there was our accommodations were a tent. Boy, it was cold. I had a Hawaiian in there, Captain Lum. Never forget his name. But he was an Army officer. There was four of us in that. Excuse me, four of us in that tent. And as I say, I was the only Air Force officer there, and I had to wear an Army uniform because the higher ups did not want the North Koreans to know there was an Air Force officer there. One time I took a side trip up there to the Panmunjom where the actual peace talks were being conducted, and by golly, I could see them, North Koreans, just a couple hundred yards away, sort of on the other side of the line. And they spotted me. I don't know how they picked me out. Boy, had their glasses, their binoculars, and they noticed there was a new officer around there.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing ever came of it.
Right. Now, what kind of condition was the city of Seoul in while you were there?
It was a mess. It was just bombed out. It just seemed to me as all rubble everywhere, and it did not look good. I understand it's quite a bit different these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, were there places you could go, to go out to eat or anything else like that?
No. The only places we ever went was other officers' clubs. Mm-hmm. The Army would have an officers' club, the Marines had, and so on. We'd stop by and visit with those guys.
Okay. Now, did they have, you mentioned, but you had a couple of guys wind up in jail. Did you have guys who go off base and get in trouble, or?
Yeah, I don't know what the problem was. There was about 4 or 5 or 6 of them. It was late at night. I was the only officer around. I had, if I wanted to get them back home, I had to go down and vouch for them, which I did. So we got them home. And they weren't from my unit, so I didn't have to worry about them. But somebody else had to.
Right. You turn them over to a sergeant, and then they'll take
Yeah.
care of it for you. Yeah. Now, were there problems with, prostitution or things like that you were aware of at all? That men got involved with, or?
No, I didn't get into. Some of the guys had girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
They were single fellas.
Yep.
But that's all I really ever knew about.
Yep. But I guess with the officers, and you're kind of in this facility, and there's not much around you in the city because of the condition it's in anyway.
Yeah.
It's that much more in isolation, and maybe more comfortable where you are than other places.
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay. But you're there 3 months, and now you've gone up to Wonsan Ni, and now what were you doing up there?
Well, running all the communications that went through the base peace camps.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it was Air Force, but we handled it. Was all our equipment, our generators, and all our teletypes and all that sort of stuff. And then all the personnel were Air Force people, and I was the Air Force officer in charge of that particular unit.
Now, did your personnel wear Army uniforms too?
No.
Oh, just you.
No, they were in fatigues, and it wasn't really much different.
Okay. I kind of wonder if maybe the Air Force, if they had either a higher quality of equipment or a different set of codes or something, and if the Koreans thought you were Army, it might be harder.
I never could decipher that. But I don't think that's true. Wasn't any
Yeah.
problem with equipment. It was just,
Yeah. Okay. Now, did you have much of a sense of what was actually going on in the peace talks while you were up there?
oh yeah. Yeah, we got word every day, oh, nothing went on today, or they got this settled or something. Yeah, we'd get that.
And how close were they getting to settling things by the time you left there?
Well, it didn't really seem like they were getting close, but we kept hoping, and finally, of course, it came to pass. But they were just hard-headed about things.
What kinds of things? Do you remember anything that they were fussy about?
No, no, that I don't.
Okay. Because some of it had to do, I think, with things like repatriation of prisoners of war. And,
I think that's possible.
you
Yeah,
had what the Chinese wanted, but you also wanted what the North Koreans wanted.
right.
And had to deal with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now, when you were then up at this base, and did you have interactions with South Korean military personnel at all?
Just a little bit. We had two sets of sentries. We had our own people, which were Army, close into the compound area around, and then the Koreans were on the outside of that, kind of like a first buffer zone. But I never met any of those people. But I just knew they were there, and I had to go. The officer of the day had to go make the trip every night, make sure the guards were all where they're supposed to be, and then the sergeant in charge of that, he would talk to the South Korean people around the outside, make sure that they were there.
Did you have any kind of impression about either the quality or the motivation of the South Korean troops, or?
No, didn't get any interaction with them, so I couldn't say.
Okay. Now, did you go anyplace else while you were stationed in Korea, or just?
Yeah, we went to Incheon. My roommate said he wanted to go see where the landing had taken place, so we drove over there and just viewed things. It was interesting to see that.
I don't know, what kind of impression did you have of it, or what did you notice there?
It was just another town, Korean town. Wasn't too badly beat up, though. I remember that. And a lot of people living on these little boats, almost like sampans.
Okay. Now, when Americans or American officers would if you travel around like that, would people pay much attention to you, or just ignore you as you went about your business?
Well, yeah, a little bit of each of what you said. They would kind of ignore us, and yet they'd look at us, and we never felt threatened by anybody.
But you didn't have people trying to mooch
Just little kids.
little kids?
Every time you stop in your Jeep, there's the little kids all over the place. They were always trying to get something.
Okay. Did they want candy, or they want all sorts of
Yeah,
things?
I don't know what they want. I didn't understand Korean, but you knew if you could give them some gum or candy, they were happy about it.
Okay. All right. And did you, but you didn't get back over to Japan or anything like that while you were in Korea?
I'm sorry?
Did you have an R&R or anything like that while you were in Korea?
Yes.
And where did you go?
Tokyo and, now I forgot the name of the other town. But there was a couple towns we went to to view we went to a park in Nara. The park was Nara. I have some memorabilia from there yet. There was a park, they had a lot of deer. I think they were fallow deer, little fellers. And they took the horns and carved things out of the horns, and I brought back some of that.
Now, how did Japan look to you as opposed to Korea?
Oh, man, that was great. That was a normal city.
Okay. Was there any evidence left over from the war that you saw, or was it pretty well cleaned up?
It was pretty well cleaned up. Of course, we didn't go to where the bombs hit,
Well, yeah.
where the big bombs, the big boomers. No, it was pretty well cleaned up.
Okay. And how did the Japanese people treat Americans, as far as you could tell?
Very nice. Very nice. The people are great. Korean people, South Korean people were great. The Japanese were great. They were very nice.
Okay. And what understanding did you have of why we were in Korea in the first place?
In Korea?
Yeah.
Well, they were overrun by the North Koreans, taking everything away from them they could. And our government didn't like that. So we got to do something about it.
But did you have a sense that you're stopping communism, or?
Well, that was the idea.
Yeah.
I don't think we stopped it.
Well, you limited it anyway.
Yeah.
As far as that went. Okay. Now, did you How long did you actually stay in Korea?
I think it was 10 months total.
Okay. Now, did you leave earlier than you thought you would? Would it normally be a year?
Yes. I figured I'd have to stay 2 years total in the Air Force, and I had only stayed 22 months instead of 24, and I was kind of surprised at that.
Okay. And how did you find out that you were getting out?
Oh, I kept bugging one of the paper shufflers, you know, and hey, get me out of here in 22 months, you know, in 1 day. By God, you made it.
So was there some system by which you could apply for that?
Nope.
Or?
Nope. You just took it as a game.
Okay. No, but did you have a sense that by the time you get out, this is sort of the spring of '53 now, I guess, that were things kind of winding down a little bit?
Oh, yes. Yes, they sure were. There was still a lot of activity. I remember we sat in, when I was up in Wonsan Ni especially, we'd sit in a big tent at night and watch a movie, and they were shooting right over the top of us all the time. These howitzers were going back and forth. You know, you hear, and the rockets too, you hear a boom and you hear whoosh. And one time one fell so close that the tent rattled, you know, everybody, boy, we dispersed in a hurry. So they were still shooting back and forth.
But were there other ways in which there seemed to be less going on, or was it any different when you left than when you got there?
And I didn't get that impression.
Okay. So really, at the time that you go out, for all you know, that it could go on for years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And over the course of the time that you were with that second unit, we spent a longer time, how much of the personnel turned over?
Wasn't much up at Wonsan Ni,
Yeah.
there wasn't much turnover at all.
Okay. We were talking about just the questions of turnover in the unit. I mean, they rotated people out. Usually you're overseas for a year and you go in and out, and you were with your second unit for 6 months or over. And so I was asking, did you have many people go in and out of that unit?
No. I think I mentioned that they just transferred 1 or 2 here and there. It was not like everybody left all at one time at all. No.
Right. Now, one thing that we didn't get in earlier that I'd like to bring in here is when you finished your training in the Air Force and you're going to get actually deployed someplace, did they give you any chance to request assignments or things like that?
Yes, they did. We each had 3 choices of where we'd like to go. And everybody picked the States as our first choice, which I did too, and because we had a wife, with us. My second choice was to go to Germany because that's my heritage. And the third choice, I always wanted to go to Alaska.
Okay. Now, for the German part, did you remember much German from being younger at that point?
More than I do now.
Okay.
Yes, because when I get around my parents, who were still alive at that time, they didn't speak English all the time, probably 99% of the time, but every once in a while they'd throw a sentence that was half German and half American, and I didn't even notice the difference.
Mm-hmm. And when you were really little, did you just speak German?
That's all, yeah.
Okay. So
up to that, coming back, after that, hit 6 years, I couldn't speak a word of English or understand it.
Okay. So when you start going back to school, did you have to kind of pick up your English again?
Yeah, that went so easy. I don't even remember any transfer of problems. The only time I remember one thing, I went out to play before my 6th birthday, and the kids, I don't know what they said, and they don't know what I said. So I went back in the house, and I said to my mother in German, of course, the kids don't want to play with me. I don't know what they're saying, and she said, well, just say I want to play with you. So I went out there, and I said, can I let you play? That started it all off.
Yep. Okay. So Germany was sort of obvious, and why Alaska for the third choice?
Always wanted to go to Alaska. I love to hunt and fish, and where else would you want to go?
Mm-hmm. All right. So you make the 3 picks, but you get Korea anyway.
Yeah.
That's just sort of where they need people. So you get to go there.
And the funny part of it was we had one fellow in our group who was from South Carolina, never even saw snow before. He went to Alaska.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, do you think back in the time you spent in Korea, is there any other events or people or memories that kind of stand out for you that you haven't brought into the story yet?
No, I remember staying at the Imperial Hotel on one of the R&Rs with my roommate. But no, I don't.
Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, or
In Tokyo.
All right. And I don't know. I mean, how luxurious was that? Or,
It was very, very very luxurious. Yeah, it was like, staying at the Hilton, as they used to say.
yeah. And compared to military barracks, it's
Yes.
got to be
Yes.
pretty good. Okay. So then you get out in part maybe because you were badgering the clerks long enough that somebody eventually says, "Oh yeah."
Didn't have anything to do with getting out.
Okay. Now, when you got out, you come back to the States. Did you have to serve any more time here, or were you just discharged?
No, I had to stay in for my 8-year obligation,
Right.
and I did stay on beyond that. I put in a total, with all reserve time and everything, of 29 years and a few days.
Okay.
But it was not enough active duty so that I don't get any retirement.
Okay. Now, but did you have? I mean, were you active reserve so that you trained?
I was. When I was going to Michigan State, I was active reserve because then they got paid, and that supplemented everything else.
Right. But I guess the sequence. But Michigan State was before you went to Korea. You come back, but then when you come back now, I mean, did you still have to show up periodically for training and things?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you're just on a list someplace. So
Yeah.
it's inactive reserve at that point.
Yes.
All right. And so you reached the rank of captain while you were in Korea, or?
No, after I got back.
Okay.
It just reminded me, I did some side training on my own. You were allowed to take courses through the mail. Nowadays you'd be on a computer, online, but took courses through the mail, and that all helped toward retirement and promotions. So I did do that for many years. And then I got another set of orders. I was getting close to it. I shouldn't say I got a set of orders. I got close to getting them to go into this Vietnam thing, and I said, "Hey, I've been there 2 or 3 times, and I don't want to go the third time." So I had a choice: either go on what they call ready status, so you could be called up at any time, or a retired reserve. So I put me in the retired reserve. So my credit time for retirement stopped right then and there. And I had 17 years and a couple of days, which were for retirement, and I needed 20.
Okay.
So I made the choice, and I live with it now.
Yeah. Well, Vietnam, I guess Air Force personnel in Vietnam, if they're ground personnel, wasn't that dangerous, but it certainly would have disrupted your life quite a bit.
It sure did.
So once you come back to the States, then what do you do?
As I started telling you, my uncle had quite a nice job at General Motors here in town. He said, "You want to come to work for us here?" He said, "I can get you in here." And that's where it started. I went in the engineering department for General Motors.
Okay.
The old plant on 36th Street that's gone now. Worked there for 3 years.
Okay.
And then I went on, different places. Went to Lear, went to Bissell.
Okay. And what kind of engineering work were you doing?
Mostly research and development, new product design, that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. And then how long did you wind up working?
I worked 18 years in engineering, and then I got tired of it, and I thought I'd try something different, and I got into real estate. And that was I sold properties for a while, and then I had my own office, and then after that I got tired of that. And after a while, many years, I took the state exam for a real estate appraiser. In the last 16 years of my work, I had my own real estate appraisal business here in town.
All right.
And I enjoyed that.
Okay. Now, to look back on the time that you spent in your kind of 2 stints in the service, what do you think you took out of those, or how did they affect you?
Everybody should go in. Start out when they're young, go in for a couple of years. You really mature quickly. If you don't, the rest of the guys will catch you. that was probably the biggest thing I took out of the service was you learn to mature. You know, you get rid of all this kid stuff that you see in these youngsters now. I laugh when they talk about these kids. Well, they were only 17. Who do you think flew the bombers over Europe? 17, 18-year-old kids.
Right. Now, do you think that that first stint in the Navy had more of an effect on you than the time in the Air Force, or is it just different?
Yeah, probably more so, because as an enlisted man, you know, you catch more dickens. And as an officer, you pass it out. But I did take more of it probably out of the Navy, yeah. Because when I had my commission, it was more like a regular job. Wasn't anybody really bossing you around all the time like you do when you're enlisted.
But it was now in a very foreign country,
Yeah.
a different situation.
But you knew it was going to end, you know, someday. You'd get home again, and you'd do the best you can in the meantime.
All right. Well, it's an unusual story, and so I'd like to thank you very much for coming in here today and sharing
Thank
it.
you.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.